Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hi.
So everyone, this is September 4th, 2020. We're on episode 89 of Transmission. And today, we were going to have two guests today, Julia Dinsmore and Liv Henry. But Julia is having tech issues, which happens with this platform all the time. But Liv's up to kind of carrying the burden. And so we're going to have a conversation today about the Poor People's Campaign. But first, just to introduce ourselves, I'm Mark Van Steenwyk. I'm the director for the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
And I'm Daniel Walpert. I direct MICA, the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing. And Viv's name is Viv, right? With two V's, the double V name. And and Julia is going to be joining on the comments. So that's great. And Viv, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. Just a little background about this week and kind of leading up to this episode. We just finished our three-part series on the left and leftist politics. And it seemed like that's a great way to lead up to this very particular campaign and something that's been going on for a number of years, really trying to generate a lot of people's power through something called the Poor People's Campaign. And so Julia and Viv have been very involved with this, are part of the Minnesota organizing team for that. And so Viv, why don't we just turn it over to you to introduce yourself and kind of kick off our conversation.
Oh, hi, I'm Vivian Henry. I'm originally from Ohio. Obviously, I live in Minnesota now. I'm a tri-chair of the Minnesota Poor People's Campaign, and also I take care of social media, Twitter and Facebook. And I've been with the organization for a year now.
Okay. So why don't, for those who aren't familiar with this, why don't you tell us a bit about what the Poor People's Campaign is and what you guys have been up to?
Okay, you have to read some of my notes. Originally the Poor People's Campaign was started by Martin Luther King Jr., I think in '67. And obviously, unfortunately, he was assassinated. But 3 years ago, Reverend Barber and Reverend Licio Harris, they restarted the Poor People's Campaign. Back in Martin Luther King's day, he battled 3 evils, but we've added 2 more. So the 5 evils and interlocking injustices that we battle and fight back against are systemic poverty, systemic racism, ecological devastation / climate change, the war economy / militarism, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. As they're all interlocked together. They all they all affect each other.
Okay. And so the climate change and the religious nationalism, those are the 2 new ones, right?
Yes. I believe so.
Yeah. So that's great. And so, I mean, maybe you could just say a little bit about your particular background that got you interested in this. I mean, how did you get involved with the campaign?
I got involved. I watched Reverend Dr. Barber on Facebook. I watched a lot of the live streams. Curious about what happened to the Minnesota Poor People Campaign, so I sent a personal message to the Facebook page, and Dan got back to me, and that's how it all kicked off. And then he said it would be restarting soon, and then within a matter of weeks, we had the kickoff of the revised version of the Minnesota Poor People's Campaign, which was August 29th in Minneapolis. And then within like 2 months, he asked me to do social media because he takes care of like 5 other pages, I guess, something like that. So he bought me a free coffee and I said yes.
What kind of coffee was it?
There you go.
Actually, I think it was pumpkin too, pumpkin spice or something. Well, not yeah.
Oh my
There we
gosh!
go.
There we
There you
go.
go, Dan.
We can come all the way around back to pumpkin spice. So Viv, we've been having this. This is one of the very few things that Mark and I do not see eye to eye on is a like of pumpkin spice. So Mark's a big fan, and I'm not, but now I'm outnumbered 2-1.
Well, no, it's not my favorite, so I'm kind of in between.
you're okay.
I appreciate that you're, blessed are the peacemakers.
That's great. Yeah, so one of the things that I was just thinking about this morning, kind of preparing for this, and Viv and Julia's chiming in on the comments, and maybe you guys could talk about this some. So I remember last fall, it was just after one of the Democratic debates, and Bernie Sanders went to an event that the Poor People's Campaign was hosting in a church, and I'm pretty sure it was in South Carolina. And so he and Reverend Barber were talking, and one of the things that that they were discussing was the fact that poverty is basically not on the political radar at all anymore. And Bernie was saying, like, yeah, last night, there wasn't one question about poverty and economic inequality, and so. And of course, the people there were in agreement. So I guess, why do we think this is, right? Why is it that this is either invisible or deemed not worthy of conversation? What's your perspective on that?
Well, I guess first I should say that I am poor. I've lived in poverty for about 4 years now because I've battled for a Social Security disability, and that's arduous process, because this is like a long time. And then it's even more. I have to make this fact: we found out that SSD will be eliminated next year if 45 is reelected. Then Social Security as a whole will be eliminated by, I think, 2023. So I may never get SSD. But anyway, but I'm poor, Black, a woman, and disabled, so I'm in 4 targeted minorities. But in regards to poverty, from what I understand, and Reverend Barber and Reverend Liz T. Harris repeatedly say, Democrats run away from discussing poverty, and then the GOP racialized poverty, because with the GOP, the welfare queen and all the other things that they've said for decades that people have been watching and believing, when really it's majority of people who are poor are not people of color. But then they get non-wealthy white people to believe that Black and brown people are the enemy, especially the poor, and they're robbing and taking things away from everyone else, or I guess we're leeches, or something. When in fact it's the top 1% who are looting our money. Not seeing any of it because it doesn't filter down. So one of our key phrases is when we live from the bottom, everybody rises. So if you would, there are 40 million people lived in poverty before COVID-19. That's almost half of our nation. Almost half of our nation lived in poverty before COVID. So what is it now? It's probably half at least, you would think, 7% more. So it doesn't make sense, I guess. Consultants repeatedly tell the leaders not to talk about poverty because it's a bad word. The other terminology when they should just say poverty. It's like it's a taboo word.
Right. Yeah, and this is why I think it's great that you guys have added this Christian nationalism to the 5 legs here of, or the tentacles. Maybe it should be tentacles rather than legs. Of this issue, because so much of this, of what you're describing, I think comes out of this very perverted form of Christianity that we have in this country that basically ends up blaming poor people for their own predicament. And saying that, yeah, you know, there's the image of laziness, you know, you haven't pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, you know, there's something wrong with the poor person, and so we don't have to look at them, or when we look at them, it's with a sort of disdain. Whereas you said the real looting and the real leeching is going on at the top, not at the bottom.
But you know, this is, I know this is an egregious example, but there was a meme going around yesterday where the person basically said, if you hate capitalism, odds are you hate Jesus. And it was just so stated so starkly. And I was looking at that, and when I see memes like this, I try to look at it through my current lens and then the conservative rural lens that I had growing up. And, you know, that's how I thought too. Like, a lot of people think that. And there's this idea that, like, a lot of this is driven, both the white nationalism, the Christian nationalism, this hating poor people, it's driven by a type of resentment that just runs through politics, right? So I'm wondering, like, it's like, even with something like student loans, which is one that's not as, one of the few areas where economics gets talked about still, the idea of, like, setting people's debt free is stopped by people thinking that, well, I had to pay $100,000. Why should you get something for free? There's this idea that somehow you're taking advantage of the system if you're poor, which is, again, this welfare queen idea. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering how that narrative, it's so deep in people's, like, in their bellies. I mean, how do you begin to counteract that sort of, like, that, just that resentment that's looking for a reason just to scapegoat millions of people?
And that's one thing I taught you guys earlier, that, you know, basically a former friend called me a welfare queen a couple years ago. How can I be a welfare queen when I get, what, 197 general assistance? Really, it's 203, but due to an error they made years ago, I owe them money, so I get 197 instead of 203. Right, and then I get 191 food stamps, but due to the pandemic, I can't, COVID, $3 more, because the top amount an adult can get in Minnesota, or maybe nationwide, is a 194. So I get $3 extra during the pandemic. But his main issue was because I have Medicaid, I have free insurance. Well, I don't know, at this point, like 10 pre-existing conditions. I'm not worthy to live. I'm not allowed to have health care to help me. And, like, this last Monday, I burned my hands. So a lot of poor people won't go to the hospital because it's going to be an astronomical bill. Why would you go when you're already in debt and you're going to brag up a whole lot more debt? And then that's why people get sicker, because they can't take care of themselves because they have no insurance. I mean, the welfare queen is just, you know, I've learned all this stuff in the past couple of years too. It's just something to instill fear in people and turn non-wealthy white people against black people. Now everybody, and, like, per Tim Wise, he's a leading anti-racism educator, they've been doing that for centuries, and people still fall. It's a con. It's a con. Instead of fighting, we fight each other instead of fighting the elite. If we all join forces, which is what the Poor People's Campaign wants, you know, join everybody together, we could win, because we have the strength in the numbers.
Yeah.
Done violently, though.
And Marcia's got a comment here, a question, and please, you know, bring your comments and questions to the fore here. Please don't hold back until 10:31.
Marcia writes, is COVID-19 hitting people living in poverty disproportionately? And is this why all the deaths are not getting a reaction? Is it another form of ignoring poverty rather than tackling it?
Yep, that's one reason, and then also because it's disproportionately affecting Black and brown people. And from what I understand, I guess when they found that out months ago, that's when the current regime decided not to fully put into effect helping everybody. Because then I think mental health experts have said this repeatedly. It's a form of democide and genocide. They don't have to put us in concentration camps. Well, I mean, of course, obviously migrants are in concentration camps in our southern borders and refugees. But, the rest of us, they can just kill off now with the pandemic and not giving us a monthly stimulus that they could, because we have the money. Scarcity is a lie, as I've learned through the Poor People's Campaign. They just gave, $3 billion to the top 1% in wealthy corporations. And we only got one stimulus check of $1,200. When other nations who are less, we're the greatest, but they're, if they're less than we are, how are they taking care of their people? But our country can't take care of us during a pandemic, and people are suffering and dying.
Well, a lot of it's complicated for folks to think about. So before the pandemic hit, Elon Musk, his net worth was less than half of what it is now. Although the super billionaires have made money, but it's so abstract to us. But we can think about somebody who's getting medical assistance and a couple $100 in food stamps and be like, well, I don't get $200 in food stamps. Our brain can latch onto that, and so we get resentful. But Elon Musk, it's like, well, he was a billionaire before. He's still a billionaire, and he's making jobs or something. He's doing good. We don't think about this because we're being, like you said, conned. We're being tricked.
Yeah, they're getting filthy rich, and we're getting filthy poor.
Yeah. Well, and part of the strategy of the divide and conquer, right, is that the way that our society is set up in terms of capitalism and what is a quote job and good job, is that the people who then do have the jobs that are slightly above the poverty level, those jobs don't pay living wages, right? And that's what helps to set up this resentment, right? And so if you've got somebody that's making, $8 an hour and not getting food stamps, they are not making enough to make a living. And so then it's very easy, as you said, to do the divide and conquer thing, rather than everybody join together and say, hey, look, the problem is the people who are setting up the system. The problem is not each other, right? And that just unfortunately is this very normal human response. You kind of turn and attack the person who is sort of right next to you, rather than this power that is farther away. And this is what is the value of these national campaigns and the solidarity, is that you get a lot of people together, trying to work on and talk about these very important issues.
And we're in 46 different states right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And
some comments coming in. Julia was going to join us today, and she's been lurking on Facebook the whole time. Which, glad to have you any way we can, Julia. Sorry it didn't work out. But Julia wrote, we on the bottom of society are the majority and thus feared by power elites, thus the need to divide us from one another. That's right.
Yeah.
It's been the tactic from day one.
Yeah. This is what caused the creation of the division between white and black in our society, right? Is that when you had the initial peasant uprisings in the Virginia colonies, it was a multiracial uprising, because you had people who were enslaved were not divided by race. And so the landowners are like, wow, okay, there are more of them than there are of us. And so we've got to figure out a way to divide and conquer. And so they created this notion of whiteness, where the white slaves could time out of slavery and the black slaves couldn't. And then suddenly that created this division among the majority, that was then used to kind of pacify folks. And yeah, I mean, it's, Machiavelli was the one that wrote about this very clearly in Italy during the Renaissance. But this is something that, power elites have known about forever. And it's very sad, as you say, that it keeps working.
I learned that from anti-racism educator Tim Wise, because there's a video snippet and a long presentation on YouTube about how Trump or even the Democrats have used it, but in this moment, it's primarily the Republicans divide and conquer strategy, and that it's been going on for centuries, and we still fall for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because we're so divided.
Yeah.
That's right. Joshua Levine did a really good book and podcast on the history of the Linda Taylor, the welfare queen, I'm not sure who that is, who kidnapped people, likely was a murderer, focusing on the food stamp fraud is to miss the mark on understanding who she was and what she was about. Yeah, I don't know anything about that story.
Yeah.
I'm looking at that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Julia is serving. This is a great service that she's providing. She's designing a recovery program for wealth hoarders. Everyone here who's listening who's hoarding wealth, hit Julia up. She'll help you figure out how not to do
that. Yeah. Good.
We need that. I wish that were really just a widespread thing. Kathleen writes, when I was poor, I didn't go to the dentist for cleanings. Later, I had to have fillings, which ended up costing more. It's often cheaper to buy in bulk, but of course, I couldn't do that. I couldn't get my hair or nails done. People avoided looking at me in the eye like poverty was somehow contagious.
Yeah. And I think that's another very important point is that in our highly individualistic and alienated society where people are not cared for, right? I mean, this is kind of what we're talking about, right? Is sort of an allergy to caring for people. There is this fear, right? And that, this could happen to me, right? And, people talk about that, and you use that 40% number. I know that 40% of households in America could not afford a $400 emergency expense, right? So I think that people do feel like poverty is contagious, because there's this fear like, okay, this could happen to me. And then, right, nobody would take care of me. Everybody would hate me. I would hate myself, and so that also sets up this incredible kind of alienation and negativity between human beings, right? I mean, people are all human beings and worthy of care. And it's amazing how quickly we forget that.
Yeah, isn't that what Jesus said? I think he loved everyone and took care of it. Didn't he love the poor? Not necessarily the most, but he said to take care of the poor. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Isn't that's what's in the Bible, to take care of the poor and the elderly, the least of these, or whatever the saying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do people forget that? God wouldn't be. I mean, Jesus wouldn't be partying with Elon Musk or Bezos. He'd be poor. He'd be poor people.
Right. Yeah, I mean that the biblical sort of gold standard for the good society is caring for the widow and the orphan. I mean it's repeated over and over and over and over again, and it is quite amazing how that gets twisted. And then, of course, all these other very negative mythologies, right? I mean, it's very well documented that on average, people who are poor work harder than people who are rich. And yet somehow we have been sold this myth that poor people don't work hard. And that's absolutely not true. And so, again, it's kind of interesting. I mean, in a terrifying, morally decrepit way, that people get twisted by these, formational mythologies, which is something we've talked a lot about on Transmission.
Yeah, it's weird. Like it's weaponized against us. So, like, I have I have several broken teeth, and now it's weird. Like, you go into the dental office, and you barter now. Like, you can get a special tooth. Like, if you need tooth pulled, it's half the price. Like, it's really weird. I'm like, wow, this is where we're at as a society. But if I complain about this with the wrong people, they get mad at me for complaining about having broken teeth, as though maybe you shouldn't have had so many of those lattes, or like the way people talk about millennials eating too much of avocado toast. So it's like, this is the things that people complain about instead of like looking at the cause of these problems.
And it makes no sense, especially during COVID. Like, if we had universal health care, that would help in the midst of a pandemic, because everybody would have health care and they'd be healthier and able to fight the pandemic better. I mean, some people would still die, obviously, but you know what I mean? If you're healthier, better chance at surviving.
Right.
I mean, universal health care should be a right. We have to admit, we have to say that, the GOP still want to take away Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, I should say, in the midst of a pandemic.
Yeah.
How can you take away health care in the midst of a pandemic? That's evil.
Yeah, it is evil.
Yeah. No, it is. And, and to Kathleen's point, the sad thing is that prevention and caring for people is cheaper than the remedies later of taking care of these problems, right? I mean, education is cheaper than prison. Preventative health care is cheaper than going to the emergency room. Basic care for people is a money saver. And so when we see that, we realize that actually this is not even about good economics, right? Which is what the GOP tries to convince us of. This really is about an incredibly, as I said, morally decrepit attack on human beings. That really is what is behind this. And we got some more comments here. Julia's chiming in. We got something from Mark too.
And then Gus, I'll start with Julia. My book used in community colleges will follow up speaking with me has been Mending Division Between Working Class and Raised Poor in the Midwest. Yeah, that's another tension, like the tension between different levels of people who aren't even middle class.
Oh, here's her book.
Yeah, there it is.
Yep.
My name is Child.
She sent me a copy.
Yeah, check that book out.
It's a great book.
Yeah. There it is. Gus writes, Linda Taylor, who you mentioned earlier, was the person that the term welfare queen was first used about and then made famous by Ronald Reagan. The book podcast he's referring to is called The Queen.
Okay. Cool.
Mark writes, our capitalist system requires poverty as a motivator to keep us slaves to capital. Either you participate in the exploitation as the exploited, or you face being unhoused and unfed. It is. It's like this, the fact that our overlords can take away our livelihood and everything from us and leave us destitute keeps us in line. So it's the biggest, it's the carrot and the stick.
Yep.
One thing I wanted to mention real quick that you're welcome, Julia. Thanks for not being here. No, just kidding. One thing I wanted to mention, the Poor People's Campaign, we're really focused right now on getting people registered to vote. We're nonpartisan. We endorse policies, not politicians. We endorse policies that help poor people, not harm them. And we're mobilizing, organizing, registering, and educating people for a movement that votes. We're going to have a series of town halls coming up, national, in different key strategic states around the country. That's coming up starting, I think, next week. So one of our big things is, tell the truth and let people know that they need to vote and that we have the power if we all vote.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that non-voter participation is really a big part of what we're talking about here. Is that people become demoralized, alienated. Of course, you have all kinds of methods for voter suppression, right? And so you have a majority of people in this country who for one reason or another, have opted out of the political system. And that only serves the interests of the wealthy, because the fewer people that participate, the fewer people they've got to scare or brainwash or get on their side, and it's very, very problematic.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't vote because their name isn't heard. They never hear the politicians say poverty, poor. It's just
Right.
like middle class. Because when Reverend Barber and Reverend Lee, when I got more attuned to that, then I would listen in on the conversation, the debates, the presidential debates, and like, they're right. They're not saying poverty and poor,
Yeah.
when almost half
Yeah.
of the nation lives in poverty. So why would you want to vote if they never discuss you? You're like left out of the whole. You're left out of the whole discussion. Why would you want to vote for people who don't care about you, or you perceive they don't care about you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Here's a
Yeah,
comment
Kat?
from Catherine. I do not understand how the hell any Americans beside the super rich want our horrible, expensive, shitty healthcare system. Tell us how you really feel, Catherine. I just hit the income limit for state. This is bizarre how this works. So, like,
she's got a next comment. Why don't we finish up?
okay. Healthcare, state healthcare assistance and options look terrible. When I was a little poorer, I qualified for far better coverage with affordable monthly payments and no deductible. I feel like I can't afford to take days off my job, which is manual labor, and I'm scared of what will happen if I get sick. Why does anyone want this?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing for our family. We just hit the bump, and so now all of a sudden we have to pay $500 a month more than we did before because we make a couple $100 more a month in income.
Yeah.
So we're not losing.
No, and you know, and this is the insanity of the system, and the truth of the matter is that it is simply all predicated around sucking money up the ladder for those who are at the top and who are wealthy. And you know, and I think, though, Viv, to your point, you know, I think the answer to Catherine's question is that the average person does not want this system. But the problem is that, you know, when you're watching debates or when you're listening to these people and you realize, like, oh, nobody wants to take care of me. Like, none of the people on the stage want to take care of me. None of these people are talking about a real healthcare solution. None of these people, you know, year after year, decade after decade, that this stuff is not going to change. Eventually, right, your attitude is, well, the hell with this. I'm just not going to participate. And that's it's very understandable.
My former PCA, well, I still don't know if she's my PC. Well, she even said that. Why should I vote?
Right. Yeah.
And I've heard it when I've been around other people who are poor. Why should I vote? What are they doing for me?
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, a couple last comments.
Sarah's writes, means testing shit is evil. Yep.
Absolutely.
Julia says, yes, Catherine, say that, ask that. Yeah.
All right, well,
if people could, you can email Minnesota at poorpeoplescampaign.org to find out more about us. And if we would love for a lot more people to get involved, check out our Facebook page and Twitter. I'm the one who primarily takes care of those, but hit us up in Minnesota at poorpeoplescampaign.org. We're trying to increase the number of people on our coordinating committee and just in general, because we want this movement in Minnesota to last this time and not to fall apart.
Yeah. So check out Poor People's Campaign. The various pages that Viv was talking about, or if you just Google Poor People's Campaign, if you didn't catch those, you'll find it. Get on their email list, check out their various virtual town halls and different events that they have. Get involved. Great movement, great bunch of people. So Viv, thanks so much. Julia, thanks so much. And we've just kind of scratched the surface here, but it's really good to get the word out about this. It's a very important movement.
Yeah.
No, thank you guys. I appreciate having me on.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.
All right, bye. I'll start listening to you guys now.
Okay. Awesome.
And accept my friend request.
All right, bye.